A widow can lose her life faster than she can grieve. It happened in Pittsburgh, in late February, freezing rain, slush on the steps, grey daylight that never warmed up, and a certified envelope that didn't mean what the record said it meant. Her husband's daughter called her disrespectful for dating again. The paperwork called her notified. And the only reason that lie collapsed was a certified label that didn't belong on that envelope. My name's Frank Hale. I work while the city sleeps. No rumors, just records. Receipts, barcodes, signatures, timestamps. I don't guess, I verify. Most people think mail is just mail. Bills, coupons, birthday cards that show up late. But certain envelopes aren't mail. They're leverage. When it's certified, the sender isn't trying to communicate, they're trying to prove something. And on the morning this started, somebody tried to prove a widow had been warned, so they could shut off her life by Monday. I was on the sorting floor at 4:36 a.m., under those humming lights that make everyone look tired. My handheld was doing its usual rhythm. Scan, beep, scan, beep, like a metronome I've lived with for 25 years. Then my thumb hit a piece that felt too stiff. Court stiff. Clean window. Heavy paper. The kind of envelope that doesn't get sent unless someone's ready to ruin a week. Addressee, Janine Walker. Sender, Pennsylvania Employee Benefits Administration. Subject line, visible through the window like a threat. Notice of hearing / response required. That's when the first thing went wrong. The green certified label on the front looked fine at a glance. But when I angled it under the overhead light, I saw the corner lift, just slightly. Like it had been pressed down twice. Like it had been moved. I don't romanticize instincts. I just know what normal looks like. Certified labels go on once. They don't get repositioned. If somebody repositioned it, there's usually a reason. I scanned it. Beep. There's usually a reason. The handheld didn't throw an error. It did something worse. It showed a complete delivery history. Clean, confident, finished. Delivered. Left with individual. Yesterday, 2:18 p.m. Location tag, UPMC admin, mailroom. Which is impossible, because I was holding it in my hand at 4:36 a.m., unopened, uncreased, fresh. Paperwork doesn't just record a story, sometimes it creates one. And when a certified record is wrong, the story turns into a weapon. I flipped the envelope over and checked the sender's barcode, an intelligent mail line printed into the postage. That barcode is what the sender's system uses to match their manifest, their chain, their proof. Then I looked back at the green label number. They didn't match the way they should. To most people, it's just numbers. To me, it's a fingerprint. The envelope belonged to Janine Walker. The sender barcode tied to Janine Walker. But the certified label, the piece that creates the delivered proof, belonged to a different record, a different name, a different story. I pulled the piece aside, walked it to my supervisor's cage, and printed the exception report. Not because I wanted drama, because when the record is wrong, you save the record that proves it. By 5:12 a.m., the trucks were loading, the floor was louder, and nobody wanted problems. That's how you lose people, by counting on them to care. So I did what I always do. I made the problem small, and I made it official. I printed the scan history. I printed the container log. I snapped a timestamp photo of the envelope beside my handheld screen. Then I locked the envelope back into the accountable slot so it couldn't disappear into somebody else's hands. Then I went out en route, because the route doesn't care what I know, it cares what I can prove. Janine Walker didn't know any of this yet. To her, the day started the way grief starts, quiet, heavy, and complicated. Janine was 44, ICU nurse. The kind of woman who doesn't break down because she's learned the luxury of breaking down costs too much. Her husband, Mark Walker, had died 8 months earlier. Sudden, heart. One of those losses that doesn't give you a final argument, doesn't give you closure, just gives you paperwork. And the family? The family gave her judgment. She'd been married to Mark for 5 years. Not a high school sweetheart story, a second life story, a we found each other late and tried to do it right story. And that kind of love makes certain people furious because it proves love didn't start with them. Mark had an adult daughter from his first marriage, Emily, 28, polished, controlled. The kind of person who smiles like she's filing something. Emily had tolerated Janine when Mark was alive. After he died, she stopped pretending. It started at a memorial dinner, a small thing on paper, a big thing in the blood. Janine went because she thought it was respectful. She thought showing up meant she was still part of the family story. She walked in with a casserole dish, wearing black like you're supposed to, carrying herself like someone who didn't want attention. Emily's aunt looked her up and down and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Well, you're still here." Janine didn't answer. Then Emily did what people do when they want to humiliate you without saying the ugliest words. She said, "I just think it's fast, how you're moving on." Janine's hands stayed steady on the dish. Fast. Mark had been gone 8 months. 8 months of hospital shifts and funeral invoices and probate letters and waking up alone to a quiet house. Fast. David Kerr had come into Janine's life not like a romance movie, like real life. A neighbor who kept an eye on her porch light. A man who didn't ask for her grief to be smaller so he could feel bigger. Janine didn't bring David to that dinner. She wasn't asking for approval. But Emily had already found out. She wasn't asking. People always find out what they're hunting. Emily said it like a verdict. Dad would be disgusted. And then, because she wanted witnesses, Emily added, "Everyone agrees, right?" There are 2 kinds of silence. The kind that protects you and the kind that isolates you. That dinner gave Janine the second kind. Someone laughed, a nervous, cruel little laugh. Someone else said, "We just want what's best." And Janine sat there while her chest stayed quiet and her face stayed calm and her hands stayed still. Because Janine didn't confront. Not then. That's the thing about adults who survive. They learn that confrontation is sometimes a gift you hand to the person who's trying to destroy you, because it gives them a scene they can rewrite later. Janine ate a few bites, said thank you, left early. At home, she took her coat off and stood in the kitchen for a long time without moving. Then she made a decision that didn't look like revenge. It looked like silence. It looked like, "I'm not going to beg for a place at your table." And the next day, she went back to work. She didn't fight the family. She didn't send paragraphs by text. She didn't post anything online. She kept her shifts, paid her bills, answered emails, signed forms. Because her life didn't stop being real just because other people didn't like the shape of it. That's when the paperwork came. On Monday morning, Janine tried to refill Mark's old heart medication that had been transferred to her plan for a dependent coverage adjustment. She'd been putting off parts of this because grief makes you procrastinate on the things that feel like admitting someone's gone. The pharmacy tech ran the card, looked at the screen, blinked. "I'm sorry," she said, careful. "Your coverage is inactive." Inactive. A word that sounds mechanical until it hits your life. Janine said, "That's not possible. I've been paying." The tech turned the monitor slightly, like people do when they're trying to prove it's not personal. Turned the monitor. It wasn't personal. It was procedural. Survivor benefits suspended. Failure to respond to notice. Failure to respond. Janine stared, then said the only thing that mattered. "What notice?" That's how they get you. Not by taking your house with a crowbar, by taking your future with a sentence in a database. Janine called the benefits office on her lunch break. 23 minutes on hold. 2 transfers. A clerk who sounded tired enough to be honest. The clerk said, "We mailed you a certified notice of hearing. It was delivered." Janine said, "Delivered where?" The clerk gave the address. Mark's old townhouse address, the one he'd sold years ago. The one that wasn't on Janine's file. The one Janine had never lived at. Janine said, slow, "That's not my address." The clerk said, "The record shows delivery and signature capture." Janine asked for a copy of the proof. The clerk said, "We can email the delivery confirmation." And that's when the family story turned into a record story. Because Emily had been calling Janine unstable in private messages to relatives for weeks. Subtle, strategic, concerned. Janine knew because a cousin slipped and forwarded one of those messages to her by accident, then panicked and said it was just worry. Worry doesn't come with a campaign. Emily wanted Janine seen as unreliable, because if Janine looked unreliable, then anything that happened to Janine looked earned. That's the hidden truth people don't admit out loud. Sometimes the goal isn't your money. Sometimes the goal is your credibility. If you can take that, everything else becomes paperwork. By the time Janine got off shift, the email was waiting. A PDF. A screenshot of a tracking page. The words that end arguments before they start. Delivered. And underneath it, the lie with a timestamp. Left with individual. Janine stared at it in her car as freezing rain ticked on the windshield like a countdown. She didn't scream. She didn't call Emily. Countdown. She didn't call her mother-in-law. She did something quieter. She opened a new folder on her phone and named it Mark/Benefits. Then she started saving everything. Screenshots, call logs, emails, dates. Because fear doesn't move paperwork, records do. That night, she went to David's place for 20 minutes. Not for romance, for oxygen. David listened without trying to fix it with words. He said one thing that mattered. "What do you need?" Janine said, "I need proof." David nodded like he understood, because he did. Some people love you with poems. Some people love you by keeping you steady while you build a file. The next morning, I got the call. It wasn't dramatic. It was a voicemail from my supervisor. "Frank, you flagged that certified mismatch. Recipient called the unit. Says benefits are suspended. Wants information." I called the number back during my break. Janine answered on the second ring. Her voice was controlled, tight, but not cracking.
Mr. Hale?
Frank, I said. You're the postal carrier who saw something wrong with a certified letter? She asked. I don't guess, I told her. I verify. There was a pause, then a small exhale, like she'd been holding her breath, waiting for one person to say something clean. Yes, she said.
Okay.
I told her what I could tell her. I didn't tell her a story. I told her a procedure. I have a certified piece addressed to you that carries a label with a delivery history that doesn't match the envelope, I said. I printed the scan history. I photographed the item with timestamps. It's in our accountable cage. Janine said,
So, the record that says I was notified
may be tied to the wrong tracking number, I said, or a label that was moved. Janine went quiet. Then she said,
Can you give me that documentation?
Policy says I can give you your tracking history and our internal exception printouts as a carrier statement, I said. No advice, just facts.
I don't need advice,
she said, voice hard now. I need facts. That's a sentence that tells you who you're talking to. I met her at the post office lobby at 6:30 p.m. because she worked days and I worked early. Janine walked in wearing scrubs under a winter coat, hair pulled back, eyes steady. She didn't look like someone who failed to respond. She looked like someone who had been on her feet for 12 hours and still showed up because she knew showing up mattered. I slid the printouts across the counter like they were fragile. Scan history, event code, location tag, timestamp, and my photo, envelope, handheld screen, date/time visible. Janine stared at the page that said UPMC Admin Mailroom. That's a hospital building, she said. Yes, I said. I've never received certified mail there, she said. Then the record isn't describing your life, I said. It's describing someone's attempt to control your timeline. Janine's fingers traced the line where the certified number was printed. Then she said, quiet, Emily volunteers at the hospital admin building. There it was. Not a confession, not a confrontation, a connection. Paperwork doesn't need motive, it needs access. Janine didn't run to Emily. She didn't blow it up at family dinner. She didn't beg for mercy. She did what works. She documented. The next week looked like survival with a clipboard. Janine worked overtime because the benefit suspension hit fast. No coverage means every prescription is a bill. Every doctor visit is a risk. Every emergency is a debt you don't get to refuse. She sold Mark's old motorcycle because she couldn't keep sentimental property over solvency. She cancelled streaming services, called the mortgage company, put groceries on a strict list, and when relatives sent her checking in texts that were really phishing, she answered with one word: busy. That wasn't revenge. That was boundary. Then she filed a written request with the benefits board for the notice record, the delivery proof, and the service address on file. For the notice they denied the first request. System record stands. So Janine asked a different way. She asked for the hearing docket number. She asked for the file. She asked for the administrative log of address changes. And she added one sentence at the bottom that made clerks pay attention. I am requesting correction of the record based on documented delivery mismatch. That phrase is like turning a key. It forces them to look at the mechanism, not your emotion. When the hearing date came, it wasn't a courtroom with wooden benches and drama.
It was a conference room in a government building that smelled like copy paper and old carpet. A hearing officer, a clerk, a small recorder on the table, an American flag in the corner that looked like it had been dusted once this decade. Janine sat with a folder thick enough to feel like armor. David sat behind her, not holding her hand, not making a scene, just present. Emily arrived 10 minutes late, dressed like a professional, hair perfect, shoes expensive, face calm. She brought an attorney, not because she had to, because she wanted to look inevitable. Emily didn't look at Janine like a daughter-in-law. She looked at her like a threat to a legacy she thought she owned. The hearing officer asked the basic question. "Ms. Walker, did you receive notice of this hearing?" Janine said, "No." Emily's attorney smiled politely and slid a printout across the table, the tracking page that said, "Delivered." Emily didn't speak at first. She let the record talk for her. That's the thing about paper. It speaks even when it's lying. The hearing officer looked at Janine like he'd seen this story before. Someone upset, someone late, someone claiming the system was wrong. Janine didn't react like that. She didn't plead. She said, "I'm going to show you why the record you're relying on doesn't belong to the envelope you think it does." Then she opened her folder and did it the way paperwork respects, one exhibit at a time. She placed my carrier statement on the table. She placed the envelope photo with timestamp. She placed the scan history showing the label's delivery event at a hospital admin mailroom. Then she placed the benefits board's own notice letter, the one they claimed they sent, showing her correct address printed on it. The hearing officer blinked. Because now there were two realities. A screenshot that said, "Delivered," and a chain of custody that said, "Not to her." Emily finally spoke, voice smooth, wounded innocent. "This is just confusion," Emily said. "Janine has been unstable since Dad died. She forgets things. Janine didn't flinch. She didn't defend her grief. She defended her record. "I work ICU," Janine said. "I don't forget certified notices, and I don't live at the address on that screenshot." The clerk asked, "What address is it?" Janine answered. Then she slid a utility bill with her actual address, dated, clear. The hearing officer looked at Emily's attorney. "Why was the notice served to an address that isn't hers?" The attorney said, "That address was on file." Janine said, "Show me where." Silence. Then Janine did the move that wins without raising your voice. She took the envelope photo I'd taken and pointed at the corner of the green certified label. "Look," she said, "the label is lifting. It's been moved." Emily's eyes sharpened for half a second. The kind of tiny reaction people have when they recognize the trap closing. The hearing officer leaned in, closer. Then Janine placed one more exhibit down, something the system never expects. A hospital volunteer sign-in printout. Janine had requested it through the hospital's public office because Emily volunteered under a program that required time logs. The log showed Emily's name on the date and time the scan claimed the item was left with individual at the hospital admin mailroom. Emily's attorney started to object. The hearing officer raised a hand and said, "Calm. I'm looking at a record that places the interested party at the exact location and time of the alleged delivery." Emily's face stayed polished, but her jaw tightened. Janine didn't accuse. She didn't call Emily a thief. She just asked the question records are built for. Who was the individual it was left with?
Emily's attorney tried to answer with air. The hearing officer didn't accept air. He turned to the clerk. "Is there a signature image?" The clerk tapped keys, then frowned. "No signature image attached," she said. "It just says, 'left with individual.'" Emily's mouth opened, like she'd planned a line and now couldn't use it. Because the record was no longer a win. It was a gap. And gaps are where truth lives. The hearing officer looked at Janine. "Ms. Walker," he said, "you're requesting reinstatement pending proper notice." Janine said, "Yes." He looked at the pile of exhibits again. Then he said the only words Janine needed to keep breathing. "I'm issuing an administrative stay on the suspension." Stay. A clean word. A stamped word. A word that stops the bleeding. He continued, "The board will re-serve notice to the correct address. Any adverse action based on the prior notice is set aside." Set aside. Emily's attorney tried to salvage. "Your Honor!" The hearing officer cut him off without raising his voice. "This isn't court," he said. "This is compliance, and your service record is compromised." Compromised. Emily's face finally changed, just slightly, like someone watching a door close that they thought was locked open. Janine didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She gathered her papers like a professional and walked out without giving Emily the thing she wanted most: a scene. Outside the building, David asked, "Are you okay?" Janine looked at him and said, "I'm still standing." That's what love looks like in real life sometimes. Not roses, not speeches, just, "I'm still standing and you're still here." Just. A week later, the reinstatement letter arrived. This time correctly addressed, properly served, clean chain of custody. Janine kept a copy. Of course she did. She also filed a formal change request to lock her address on the benefits file, added two-factor verification, and put a mail hold notice on any future certified reroutes. Because once you see what paper can do, you stop pretending it's harmless. Emily sent one text. It wasn't apology, it was control. "Dad would be ashamed of how you handled this." Janine didn't answer. Not because she was afraid, because she'd learned something that changes your whole life. When people weaponize paperwork, they don't deserve your emotions. They deserve your boundaries. So Janine set one. She blocked the number. Not in anger, in procedure. And when the family asked why she stopped coming around, she didn't argue. She sent one email, 2 sentences. "With the benefits matter resolved by official order, I'm requesting all future communication be in writing. I'm not discussing my personal life." No threats, no revenge, just a record. I went back to my route the next morning. Same slush, same grey sky, same streetlights turning off like they were tired too. But I kept thinking about one line. They said she was unstable. The paperwork said she was notified. And in the end, neither of those opinions mattered. Only one thing mattered: the record that proved the record was wrong. I don't do drama. I do verification. And if someone in your life tried to punish you for moving forward using paperwork instead of truth, would you confront them first? Or would you do what Janine did and let the record speak? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories where silence wins because proof is louder, subscribe.